They said her eyes were the color of river stone before the storm, too pale, too knowing, too still. The elders in the Mescalero camp whispered that she carried the wind of something unnatural. Even as a child, she was watched with caution, never embraced the way others were. Her mother, once a healer, died in silence, and her father never returned from the mountain where he sought vision. The girl's name was Saniyé, which once meant the Shining One, but no one called her that anymore. She lived alone near the salt flats, in a hut of cedar branches and hide, shunned not for something she had done, but for something they feared she might bring. She moved like a shadow, surviving on herbs and silence. The camp passed seasons without her, but the land remembered her. And sometimes, at dusk, coyotes would sit near her fire without growl or hunger. Sometimes birds landed on her porch and did not fly away, and that frightened the people more than if she had cursed them outright. One day, under the fading sun, a lone rider approached from the canyon, a stranger in a tattered hat, shirt torn by time, eyes dulled by war or loss. He did not know of the stories. He only saw a figure by the fire, a girl with calm hands and storm-colored eyes. He dismounted, and she did not tell him to leave. Not that day, not ever again. The stranger's name was Elias, though he never said it at first. He came with no saddlebag, no food, no past, only a worn harmonica and a horse that limped from a bullet wound he never spoke of. He didn't ask who she was. He only asked if she had water. She handed him a tin cup, her fingers brushing his. He flinched, not from her, but from memory. He stayed for one night, then one more. Then, without speaking of it, he stayed again. Saniyé said little, but her silence was kind. Her hut, though sparse, became a place of slow healing. He carved wood by the fire while she ground herbs. At night she would place one stone in the fire, a blue one, and neither of them said why. He watched the way the firelight played in her eyes. It made him uneasy. Not out of fear, but because it reminded him of something he'd buried, something sacred and nearly lost. One day, while gathering mesquite pods, he saw riders in the distance, soldiers with Union coats and empty eyes. He hid in the brush. Saniyé, though unarmed, walked past them without pause, and none of them turned to look at her. As if she was not there, or as if something older than fear kept their gaze away. He didn't ask, but that night, she told him a story about a woman with eyes like rain who once walked into fire and came back without a scar, and Elias did not sleep. Not until dawn. Elias woke early the next morning to a smell in the wind. Something burnt, something gone. He followed it beyond the salt flats, where the air turned heavy. There, not far from where the Apache once held ceremony, he found blackened earth, bones in the shape of men, smoke still rising from a broken cart. He dropped to his knees. His fingers trembled as he reached for a medallion half buried in ash, the one his younger brother once wore before they were separated in the war. Saniyé stood behind him. "I told you not to go past the salt," she said, not with anger, but with sorrow. He turned to her, the medallion pressed in his palm. Was it them? She said nothing, but her silence spoke of things too deep for words, of visions that came unasked, of people who die long before the fire reaches them, of dreams that burn slower than wood. He didn't know whether to hate her for what she knew or to thank her for not saying it aloud. They buried the bones together, marking the grave with stone, then walked back in silence, side by side. That evening, Elias opened a pouch he hadn't touched in years. Inside, a piece of paper, yellowed, frayed, water-stained. He unfolded it slowly, as if afraid the words might no longer be there. It was a letter meant for his mother, written before a battle in Tennessee. He never sent it. There was no address left to send it to. Saniyé found him by the river, reading it aloud, though no one was meant to hear. She sat beside him. The stars overhead blinked slowly, like eyes trying not to weep. When he finished, he asked, "Do you believe we're allowed to come back?" "To where?" she asked. "To before." She didn't answer right away, just reached into her woven bag and pulled out a faded piece of corn husk, carved with symbols too old for translation. "My mother used to say time is a circle drawn in ash. We walk it again and again until we choose to step out." Elias looked at the stars, and for the first time since war tore his life in half, he allowed himself to cry. Autumn whispered its way across the desert, painting the skies in muted ochres and brushing the mesquite leaves with gold. With it came something else, a heaviness in the wind, as if the earth itself held its breath. Saniyé woke one night with the weight of dread pressing against her chest. Not a dream, a knowing. Elias had grown stronger in the weeks since he arrived. The hollowness behind his eyes had softened, and yet he always kept his rifle near, even in sleep. That night, he didn't rest. His fingers clutched the edge of the blanket, and beneath it, a knife, its blade dulled by use, not rust. She asked him what haunted him. He didn't answer. Instead, he whispered the name of a man, a name she recognized. A soldier who had once roamed these canyons with blood on his hands and silence on his lips. The one they said buried Apache children in the wash near Bone Ridge. "He still walks," Elias said, not as a warning, but a confession. She reached out and placed her hand over his. "You're not him," she said. He looked away. "But I followed him, for a long time." A coyote cried in the distance, not a howl, but a broken wail, as if mourning something it could never name. They saw him before noon the next day, a rider cloaked in dust and leather, face shadowed by a wide black hat. His horse moved slow, deliberate, as though trained for war. He didn't look left or right, didn't need to. He knew where he was going. Elias froze. Saniyé stood at the threshold of the hut, wind lifting her shawl like wings behind her. "I knew he'd come," Elias said. The rider dismounted without a word, tied his horse to the lone ironwood tree, walked forward with hands empty but menace loud in every step. Saniyé stepped between them. "You're not welcome here." The man tilted his head, eyes pale like bleached bone. "I never ask." Elias reached for the knife, but Saniyé only looked into the man's eyes, not with fear, but with the exhaustion of someone who's seen death and chose life anyway. The man hesitated, just for a breath. And that breath saved them. He turned without word and rode east, vanishing in the storm that followed. After the man left, silence fell heavier than before. Saniyé gathered juniper branches and lit a cleansing fire near the riverbank. She walked in circles, barefoot, humming a tune that hadn't been sung since her mother's time. Elias watched from a distance, unsure whether he was witnessing healing or farewell. The fire cracked and spat. She tossed a bundle of something dark into the flames. Feathers, old cloth, a piece of turquoise wrapped in sinew. Elias stepped closer. "What was that?" "The part of me that thought I still belonged there," she answered. He understood, more than he wanted to. They sat beside the fire until the sky dimmed and the wind turned soft. That night, the river sang louder than usual, and neither of them dreamed. Word traveled, even in silence. The camp that had once banished her sent a boy on foot, a messenger with cracked lips and dust in his lungs. He said the chief was dying, and the elders wanted her near. Saniyé didn't answer. Elias said, "You don't owe them." But she packed her things in silence. He followed. They rode for 2 days into the heart of Mescalero land, a place where even horses stepped quiet, and the air smelled like cedar and old ghosts. At the edge of the village, children stared as she passed. No one spoke, not even the wind. Inside the chief's tent, the old man lay still, his breaths shallow. He turned his head only once to look at her, and for the first time she saw not fear, but regret in his eyes. He whispered, "I was wrong." She took his hand, and when he died an hour later, the sky wept. She didn't stay. The next morning, before the sun had touched the canyon rim, she and Elias were already gone, back to the salt flats, back to the solitude that felt more honest than the hollow welcome of those who had once cast her out. They stopped at the place where her mother was buried, beneath the stone shaped like a sleeping bison. Saniyé knelt and placed a ribbon of sage on the earth. Elias watched, then placed the medallion of his brother beside it. "They wait for us," she said. "Do you think they still see us?" "No," she said. "But they remember." A hawk circled overhead. The air was still, and somewhere deep within them both a weight began to lift. Months passed. Elias never spoke of leaving again. He built a fence, planted beans, learned the shape of her laughter and the silences between. One morning, he walked to the ridge with his rifle, not for hunting, but for memory. There he carved something into the sandstone wall. Not his old name, a new one. The one she called him when she thought he was asleep, Nantan, which meant he who listens to the wind. When he returned, Saniyé was humming by the fire, stirring a pot of cedar tea. She looked up. "You came back." "I never left." They ate without words. The coyote came again that night and lay beside the fire. The sky was clear, the wind was kind, and in that forgotten corner of the desert, where two exiles had found one another, the world quietly continued. No witnesses, no legends. Just two souls who chose to stay together.